3, 2, 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Nittany No Huddle Podcast.
From Philadelphia to Los Angeles
And everywhere in between.
filmed at the Nittany No Huddle studio.
It's Jordo, Zach, and Coach Devin covering all things Penn State football all the time.
This is from 45, and it's blocked. Lions scoop it up. Brad Haley will score.
And here we go.
All right, welcome back, Nittany No Huddle Nation. Today's video, we're going to be doing a full recap on our 45-17 win over Minnesota. Let's get right into it. First thing I didn't realize when we talked after the game, Parker Washington, that was his first touchdown of the year. So that kind of surprised me when I was going back through and watching. Another quick note, big stat that I found, Clifford, 8 of 11 on throws over 15 yards. So I thought that was huge for all the Clifford haters out there and all the Clifford supporters. Just kind of a line drawn in the sand there. But those were two things that really stood out to me right off the bat. Devin, I'll turn it over to you. After going back and settling a little bit after the game, what's your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I think initially I feel really good about how we played. I think that game is completely different if Tanner Morgan plays, honestly. No shade at all to Kalika Manis. He's just not quite ready. And to go into such a tough environment playing at Penn State in the whiteout as a redshirt freshman, that's a huge ask. And I think that game is a lot different if he's not in there. That being said, Manny Diaz did a great job as defensive coordinator with coming up with a game plan to attack him, to force him into tough throws, and to stop Ibrahim from dominating the game. I know we talked a lot about Ibrahim got his. He's just that good of a running back, I think. But to hold him to 102 yards on 30 attempts, I think any of us before the game, if we could have said Ibrahim's going to rush 30 times, but he's barely going to break 100 yards, I think all of us would have taken that and pretty happy. So again, I think Manny Diaz deserves a lot of credit defensively for his performance of calling the right plays, especially, like I said, with getting Kalika Manis into bad positions, and forcing him to do things that he's not ready to do yet technically he's a third string quarterback if you really want to break it down. So that's what really stood out to me after rewatching a lot of the game and diving into some stats is I really think this was Manny Diaz's best game other than maybe Purdue. And I think that Purdue, part of that was just because it was his first time at Penn State. We saw a lot of things that we have never seen from a Penn State defense because of him being a different type of coordinator. So for him to have a game like that, I think was really big.
Yeah, I agree with almost all of that, except I think his best game was probably Auburn.
Well, I think Auburn was just that bad.
Yeah.
So
all right, Zach, after digesting everything, what do you think?
Yeah, so I'll start where Devin just left off with the run defense. And I think as I look at the box score, I mean, obviously we talked about Muhammad Ibrahim after the game and the numbers there. But one thing I remember in the pregame we talked about was they had two other backs who were both having decent success. And then you look at the box score and you see Bryce Williams with, let's see, what did he have?
4 for 11.
4 carries for 11 yards, and Trey Potts, who came into the game with over 300 yards rushing on the season, 5 carries for 7 yards. So it was just a complete, I don't want to say domination, but really that's kind of what it statistically looks like in terms of you got 3 running backs that carried the ball 39 times for 120 yards. So almost 40 carries for 120 yards. Really, Kalika Manis, he had the 7 carries for 45 yards. He actually did a nice job scrambling, but you're just traditional straight up run plays. Penn State really, really snuffed that out. And I won't belabor it because we hit it in the post game, but that was a huge, huge part of the third down success for Penn State was that Minnesota was just failing on first and second down and putting themselves in really tough third downs. And I think Devin's right. I think if Tanner Morgan plays, it's a little different, but they seem like a team. And just recalling the 2019 game where if they have the run game cooking, they can do the RPO. Kirk Shiraka is a big RPO guy, and Tanner Morgan is great in that RPO game. But if you force him to beat you, it probably wasn't going to happen anyway. The other thing is I don't think they have any receivers right now. Chris Ottman-Bell, their big returner, is out for the year. And I just think they don't really have anybody that scares you along the outside. I can't think of the guy's name who made that really nice catch down the left sideline right before halftime, but they just were kind of offensively challenged. But that's what a good defense does to a team that is going through some stuff offensively. You don't give them any life, right? You just kind of snuff it out from the beginning. So for me, coming off of the Michigan game and the defensive struggles that we saw, I think you got to be really pleased from that standpoint that they showed up, kind of snuffed Michigan out or Minnesota out right out of the gate and shut the running game down. And it was kind of all over from there if you look at it from the defensive perspective.
Yeah, I mean, what more can we say about the defense? Really, they had a great game all around. I have it written down. Manny Diaz's defense. We kept them to 2 of 13 on third down, which is going to be absolutely huge when we cover Ohio State this upcoming week, because they are the most efficient team on third down in the country, I believe. So about, I think, 70%. So that's going to be the big matchup I think we're going to see going forward. Another thing that I guess we should address, I've seen on Facebook and the blogs, we're getting a lot of Aller Clifford hatred between the fans. I don't know if you guys, when you rewatched it, you saw I think it was after the Parker Washington touchdown, like Aller and I can't pronounce our third string quarterback's name.
Vayu or however. Yeah.
Vayu, yeah, whatever.
Bayar.
Him and Aller both like sprinted onto the field to celebrate with Clifford. So I think that's like kind of telling. I know some of the fans are like, oh, like he's gonna leave, blah blah blah. I think he's happy to be in the program. He knew he was gonna sit behind Clifford a year. I think he might actually want to sit behind Clifford to kind of take that heat off him a little bit. I mean, this is all speculation, obviously, but everything I saw, it didn't seem like he was upset that Clifford was doing well. Like, he seems like he's all in. And then also, they asked Tinsley about it after the game, about people booing Clifford, and he said that, like, essentially that he's all in on Clifford, and, like, Clifford's his guy. And, like, I mean, I think they're roommates, if I'm not...
Sounds right. I feel like I have heard that.
I'm pretty sure they're roommates. So I think, like, I know some people have been saying, like, oh, like, the locker room knows which guy they want. Like, it seems like the locker room wants Clifford. So, maybe some of the fans should, how do I put this correctly, silence themselves a little bit. I mean, I think we all want to be successful, and we all want to have the chance, to win the Big Ten and maybe play for a national title or make the playoffs. But, shoestringing your quarterback and hand jamming him into the game just because, you don't like the quarterback that's here now. I don't know if that's the right answer, but it was just interesting to hear, Tinsley, and then seeing the body language of Aller, that kind of thing, just some interesting points. I don't know. We'll turn it over to our resident Aller fanboy over here, Coach Devin.
I think everything you said makes a lot of sense. Sean Clifford played really, really well, especially after the first quarter. Definitely the last 3 quarters, I thought he played really well, made a lot of good decisions. But again, I think it comes down to Yurcik put him in a good position. And we've been saying all year that when coaches put players in good positions, that's when good things happen. And that's why coaches make so much money at that level. Yeah, recruiting is a huge deal, but putting them in good spots, giving them opportunities to be successful is what makes you a good coach. At the D1 level, every coach can come up with plays, and every coach can do all that stuff. But finding strengths of your players and incorporating them, that's crucial. And we said all season that Sean Clifford's at his best when he can easily diagnose a defense and doesn't have to make a bunch of reads, because he doesn't get to his third or his fourth read usually. It's one read, maybe a second read, and then fingers crossed that he doesn't do something stupid. And Yurcik did a really good job of getting guys in motion. We covered this a lot in the instant react, so I won't belabor it like Zach likes to say. But we sent guys in motion. We used different formations and sending guys to the boundary that we don't always send whenever we have been more of a wide side of the field type of a team. So Yurcik really put him in a good position. The other thing I will say, as the resident Allard lover, I didn't think he looked very good the last 2 drives, honestly. He made one really good play, which was Nick Singleton's touchdown, because that snap tried to go over his head, and he made a good play to gather it, bring it down, feed Singleton, and obviously Singleton just did the rest. But
benefits of being 6'4", maybe.
yeah, one of the benefits. But I didn't think he looked great, and I'm sure that it was. I mean, there's nerves. You're playing first whiteout game. It's pretty tough situation too. I still think he's the guy, and I think that in 3 years we very easily could be talking about a Heisman candidate. I would still love to see him this year more, but I get where, I mean, it's like Zach keeps saying, especially Zach says this. We have one loss, and we got to stick with the guy that brought us here this far, even though I would rather see Allard, because I still think we're going to be 9-3. So I would rather be 9-3 with Drew Allard than Sean Clifford, but that's just me. But Clifford, I think, did a really good job. So kudos for doing your job.
As our buddy Alex, good friend of the show, would say, you don't win the Medal of Honor for doing your job. So,
yep.
I mean, I think he did his job, like you said, and you know, I would say pump the brakes on if Allard's going to be a Heisman candidate in 3 years, but you know,
team could be scary good. Think about the people he's going to be throwing it to and handing it off to. That offense could be scary good in 3 years.
If they all stay.
They're all going to stay. Where are they going to go? You're going to transfer to Temple
USC.
Or something? Yeah, okay. They're all good enough to go to USC.
Well, according to our fan base, if you don't leave the program in 2 years, you're not good enough to play. So.
Good point.
But enough of hating on our 250 fans. So, Zach, what do you got?
Yeah, I was going to say, it just kind of struck me watching the Minnesota game that Clifford is sort of like a microcosm of the entire program, really, at this point for me, where I think it's fair for the folks that maybe are more in Devin's camp and want to see Allard and just sort of recognize that, you know, he's not elite. He's not going to be elite at this point, and the program needs to be elite if we want to get where we're going to go. And that's probably true, but it's also true that this team has a really good chance to finish 10-2. It'd be the second Penn win season of his career. So I feel like he's just kind of a nice microcosm of where Penn State's at, where we're very good at a lot of positions. And there's a lot of teams out there, a lot of teams in the Big Ten right now that would love to have a Sean Clifford. If you look around at some of the quarterbacks that they're running out there, but it's still a notch. It's quite a big notch below your CJ Strouds and you know, maybe your JJ McCarthy's, but it's just a good indication of we're plenty good enough to beat everyone in the Big Ten outside of Ohio State and Michigan. And frankly, this year should beat everyone that we play in the Big Ten outside of those two. But clearly we saw the Michigan game, and that's water under the bridge. And we've got the Ohio State game coming up. It's one of those years. I said earlier today to you guys, it feels like a year where you could go 10-2 with this schedule and look back and be like, we didn't have a single win that you'll go into the offseason thinking, man, that was a great win. That was the big win of the season. And that's not, you know, to take away from what could be a good season. It's just that everybody that was expected to be a little bit better coming into the season outside of the Big Two has just kind of fallen off. Minnesota, this couple weeks ago, this game last Saturday had the potential to be a huge game, right? If Minnesota,
I sold my tickets 4 weeks ago for $350.
Yeah, I mean, if Minnesota just takes care of business against Purdue and Illinois, this would have been a huge game with major implications in the Big Ten West. And who knows, the Big Ten West is insane. So, I mean, maybe Minnesota's not totally out of it, but it's certainly not looking good for them. But yeah, for me, it's one of those weird years where I call the Big Ten kind of like, they used to call it the Big Two and the Little Eight. And now this is one of those years where it's kind of like the Big Two, Little 12. So if you're Penn State, you just got to take care of business against the teams you got to beat. And you can't put all your eggs in the Ohio State, Michigan basket. And think if we lose to Ohio State, the season's over, let's just pack it in, because Devin keeps referencing 9-3 and the other teams have Division I players too. So if you don't show up, they've got players that want to play, that want to win, that want to go to the NFL. So I know I'm kind of looking ahead of there a little bit, but it's just the whole Clifford discussion for me is, I feel like he is a good microcosm of where the whole team is at, where there's a lot of people that are really unhappy that maybe shouldn't be unhappy, but justifiably want to take that next step. And I get that, and I respect that, and I'm right there with that feeling. It's just, where do we direct that our angst about Penn State seemingly not being able to take that next step. But as a great segue, one way to take that next step would be to win this upcoming Saturday. And I don't know if they can do it, but you couldn't ask for a better setup at this point in terms of back-to-back home games. You have all the momentum from the Minnesota whiteout victory going into what should be a great Big Fox Noon, or whatever they call it, showing.
Yeah, that's all good stuff. Like we've been talking, the Big Ten West, it is what it is at this point. That nobody really knows. So I guess we can move on. I guess the only other point I have written down that I want to talk about is, this might be a really hot take, but I kind of love Penn State's retro jerseys and pants. So
I'm with you.
Probably gonna get a little hate because some people, I don't know, hate change unless it's our starting quarterback. But those are the same people apparently. So I don't know. But I really like the helmet numbers. I think they look classy, and then the nice blue stripe down the offensive lineman's pants, like. That's the only other big takeaway I had that we didn't cover in the other recap. So I'll turn it over to you, Devin. Do you have anything else you wanted to talk about?
Yeah. So first, I'm with you. I love helmet numbers. I know I forget who said it in our group chat, but somebody said you're just trying to be fake Alabama. Was that you, Jordan? But
that was John.
Of course it was. Good friend of the podcast, John. Not that he'll ever watch this, but still. And I get that it's the numbers. Very reminiscent of Alabama. I'm a sucker for helmet numbers. I've always liked helmet numbers. I don't think there's anything wrong with Penn State repping different jerseys once or twice a year. I get tradition, but you have that many games now. Like, you're not playing 10 games like you used to play. You're playing 12 games. Yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with one home game wearing alternate jerseys and one away game wearing alternate jerseys. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Our pick'em graphic is black and pink. I would love to see a black and pink jersey at some point. They look so good on the basketball court, even though the team looks so bad. Might as well bring them to the football field too. So I'm with you. I like them. Even just the pant. Yeah, you can't do it for a whiteout, but even just the pant, like you said, like just a stripe on the side of the pants. It's just a nice little touch that doesn't really buck tradition at all, but just adds a little bit.
A wise parable once said, "He who is resistant to change shall surely perish." So,
true story.
I'll leave it at that. Also, I'm gonna need a fact check. Who had helmet numbers first, Penn State or Alabama?
I have no idea.
Sure we used to have helmet numbers back in the day, so
it's true.
But just a little. Any of our 250 subscribers, let us know in the comments. So, Zach, you got anything else?
No, I think we pretty much covered it. I guess the one thing I would say, and this is less of a Minnesota recap and more of something going forward, is I really like Katron Allen as the starting running back and Singleton as the change of pace. And I know that might seem backwards for a lot of the fans just because Singleton has that flashy speed, but I think Allen just has a lot of patience and vision, and I think using him to kind of break down the defense and then going to Singleton as that change of pace is a perfect complementary system. At the end of the day, as long as they're both getting carries, I think, Jordan, you were saying earlier in the season you really wanted to see more carries for both of those guys and less for Lee and Ford. And of course, Ford is gone now, and Devin Lee didn't play, and so you look at the box score, and Singleton had 13 carries and Allen had 15, and I think that's exactly what you were looking for. And they both had success. And the nice thing for me is you look at the box score, 34 carries for 175 yards, and the long run of the game was Singleton's late 30-yard touchdown run. So they did that. They put up about 160 yards combined with just really consistent, good 5-6 yard pickups one after the other. Right? It wasn't one of those sort of like bloated stats where they had one really long touchdown run that kind of skewed the stats. It was just good, consistent running game throughout, which for me, we love the long plays, and I'm not saying I don't want them, but I love being able to look back at the box score and just think, man, we didn't even break a long one, and we still had a really good running day.
Yeah, and the fact that we outrushed Minnesota, I think, is huge. Like, I would have never in a million years predicted that at the end of the game we would have more rushing yards than Minnesota. I know it's only like 10 or 11 more, but still, especially after the Michigan game where especially the three of us were really dejected with how we ran the ball. I think that the fact that we outrushed Minnesota, a team that is run first like Michigan is, it's huge. It's got to be a confident builder too, even though I know I promised that I would get into offensive line talk here, and we can do that in a minute. Even though the offensive line was terrible, we still outrushed Minnesota.
And Muhammad Ibrahim had more carries than Singleton and Allen combined, yet the two Penn State backs combined for just about 160, and Ibrahim had a little over 100. So it wasn't like Minnesota. I mean, they were trying, and it wasn't happening. And Penn State, I mean, I'm happy with Penn State running the ball 34 times in that game, but it wasn't like, it wasn't like we ran the ball 50 times and only came up with 175 yards. It was really balanced. And as I look at the box score right now, actually, I see 30. Well, if you exclude the kneel down at the end, you had 33 carries and 33 pass attempts, which is, I mean, that's perfection, right? We've talked about it before. If you can be balanced, that's exactly what you want to be as an offense.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. One other thing I wanted to go back, Devin, when you mentioned, about 9-win season, 10-win season, 30 years from now, when people are looking at the stats, they're not going to go and look how terrible our schedule was. All they're going to see is that 10 or 11 at the end of our, record. And same with when people talk about James Franklin's record and whatnot, all you see is the win versus the loss. You don't see who he won against, who he played against, unless you really go into depth and see, he didn't beat any.
Unless you're Zach.
10 teams.
Zach could tell you every win from 2006, every win from 2002. Zach knows his stuff.
Or the portion of the fan base that only cares about Franklin's record against top 10 teams, which I would probably fall onto the Franklin hater side of the spectrum. But I the people that just throw that out there, it's such a nobody beats top 10 teams. That's the whole point, right? They're pretty rare, unless you're like Ohio State or Bama. Or the other one that gets me is your record against top 25, and they'll cite a good one I see is Mike Gundy has a really good record against ranked teams. But if you look, is it actually? I mean, it's not really. It typically hasn't been beating Oklahoma when they're in the top 10. It's probably picking off K-State and Texas Tech and TCU when they're
at
all
25
in the 20s. And so you got to go a little bit. Franklin's top 10 losses are always Ohio State and Michigan, and you got to look a little bit beyond the stats sometimes and get some context. And that's coming from a guy that's, I think, pretty hard on Franklin. But
yeah, I think the last thing we have to talk about, because it keeps popping up, this nonsense with the Michigan tunnel. Can we just let it go by now? I just don't understand why we even brought that up prior to, the end of the season. So do you guys have anything you wanted to say about that before we, bury the tape on the tunnel tussle?
Just grow up.
Yeah, I think it was
to all parties.
I think
it seemed like Penn State started it. So is this really a conversation we need to have right now? I think if you have a problem with it, teach your team to not be punks. Don't start fights. If not, then you must not have a big problem with it. So
yeah, I think it was. I mean, Franklin's allegedly the PR master, and he's the Mr. Hype and the spin guy. So you have to know, bringing that up after you get your teeth kicked in, when and you have to assume that everything is filmed on somebody's cell phone. When you have to know that there's going to be footage out there that makes your guys look at least as culpable as Michigan, why you would bring that up is beyond me. If you really truly care about it and you think the Big Ten needs to do something about it, bring it up at the end of the season, or talk to Michigan's AD behind the scenes or something. But to do that, you're just basically begging Harbaugh to come up with the response that he did. And I kind of don't blame Harbaugh. for saying what he said, because he probably felt like, well, I have to respond because they kind of attacked our program as being the culprit. And I mean, both coaches, it's just kind of like put it to bed and move on. But I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Zach. Like, just be done with it. Like, kind of crap or get off the pot with it. Like, or, maybe lead your team into the tunnel so that doesn't happen. But
yeah,
just saying, both coaches, that goes for both sides. Like, if you're in the front and you have coaching at the back, like, there should never be an issue like that. But, 6 teams a year go into Michigan Stadium, don't have a problem. So that's where I'll leave it with that. But you guys have anything else you wanted to talk about?
The only other thing I want to talk about, and it'll be very quickly, less than 5 minutes, offensive line play. And Zach and I spent a lot of time talking about this in our group chat. Talking to an offensive line coach today at school, Penn State, if you watch Penn State, we do not attack blocks. And hopefully if someone's watching this that actually is another offensive line coach, and if you want to disagree with the guy that I talked to, awesome. Tell me I'm wrong. Love it. But most offensive linemen are taught to get out of their stance and punch towards people, right? Instead, if you watch Penn State, we get out of our stance, we backpedal 3 steps, and then we put our hands up. We are not going to block anybody if you give them a 3-yard head start. I mean, especially, I think that was the biggest issue in the Michigan game, and I saw it a lot in Minnesota, is that we wait for blocks. And Zach said something about, like, our whole mindset has always been to, like, maintain, right? We're not trying to drive people downfield, but we're just trying to hold them long enough. That can't be the mindset anymore. Other defensive lines are too good. You cannot let people attack you and get into the back before you even start blocking. And we never get downfield blocks. Never. We are hoping that that Clifford can get rid of the ball fast enough, or that our offensive linemen can find, or our running backs can find a way to get to the outside before we even have to block. I think that's got to change. I think, looking at our offense, as much as I want to crap on Clifford, I think the number one thing that has to change is the way we play offensive line. And obviously a lot of that comes from the last year with so much RPO. You can talk about the skill wise. Are we recruiting the best offensive line? I think it's a combination of those things. But I think we've gotten away from a lot of that RPO this year. I haven't seen it anywhere near as much. So can we please start teaching our offensive linemen when they get to Penn State to attack blocks and be the aggressor instead of just letting somebody come into your field and attack you. It has to, or this week, obviously we'll talk about it in our preview, this week will get ugly if we keep doing that. We have to attack our blocks. And that's from talking to an offensive line coach today. He said that's what they teach their kids is you're down in your stance, you're up and you punch. And then if you have to backpedal, you backpedal, but you don't start backpedaling. And that's what Penn State does. And it's super weird. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I've always said for years, with the and you hit it with the RPO. We were really an RPO based team for quite a long time, going back to Joe Moorhead, especially Shiraka in 2020 was here for just 1 year. And for me, that was always part of the sort of build an excuse that I always came up with. Not that I liked it, but just in terms of, it's understandable why our linemen aren't driving guys downfield, because on a lot of these play calls in the huddle, it's called an RPO in the huddle, so they can't get downfield, right? So you can't be downfield pancaking a guy into the stands, like you sometimes see from other teams, because you could be downfield on a passing play. But we really, I don't think we've run a lot of RPO, Devin. I think you're right. I don't think we've run a lot of it, so I don't think that's really an excuse. I think there was, I remember going back and watching the Auburn game where we were pulling a lot. We were using Brenton Strange to kick out and pulling guards and centers, and we were getting downfield, and linemen were just bullying guys downfield. And outside of that Auburn game, we haven't seen a lot of that.
Right.
I thought it was a little better against Minnesota. There were some plays where you could see some double teams and somebody getting to the linebacker. And that's why Allen and Singleton were actually getting some run plays where they were hitting an open hole and then getting a chance to make, the second level defender miss, as opposed to, trying to beat somebody at the line of scrimmage. But it is, I think it is a problem. And maybe it's just like the remnants of all of these guys were around for the RPO era. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's one of those things where I'm no like X and O's expert, but there are a lot of things I can, we can see in football, and offensive line play is tough. You know, I think we do run some zone stuff and some more traditional sort of man double team concepts. So I don't know. It's really hard to say, but there's so many plays, and like the Michigan game was a great example where you see the line fire off the ball, and then at the end of the play, when the running back is getting tackled, like at the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage, there's 3 guys that are turned around looking backwards, indicating where they either just got thrown off the ball or they just missed their block. And you never see, you watch like the really good teams play, and the running back gets tackled, and there's usually 2 or 3 linemen that are still driving somebody at the end of the play, driving the defender. And is that just elite offensive line play? Is it just better coached players? Is it strategy? It's really hard to say. I mean, there's a lot of things that we can sit and watch in football and have a good idea of what's going on, but the offensive line play is just kind of tough. I mean, if you're not in the huddle or you're not at practice knowing what the concepts are, it's tough. But regardless of what the concepts are, football has been won and lost for 100 years by big guys driving other big guys down the field. And I just think we don't do that. And that's maybe boiling it down to its simplest concept.
Yeah, I think you pretty much summed it up. Our offensive line has shown, strides compared to some of the previous years, but it's not quite where we want it. And, that could be a recruiting issue, maybe with Yursich being here, going into his 3rd year next year. Maybe we'll start to see some of those newer recruits come in and kind of make a difference. But Devin, you have anything else that you want to cover in the Minnesota part?
No, I think I'm good. I mean, it's a huge win, and hopefully we can carry momentum into our next podcast.
Right. Well, we'll see how the preview for the Ohio State will go. Zach, what do you got?
Nothing. I think we hit it. I think it was a good solid win in a moment when you really had to have it. And it was actually more than just a good solid win. It was a pretty demoralizing beatdown. I think if you're a Minnesota fan, feeling like in the first quarter, like, hey, we might be in this game, and then it just went downhill quickly for them.
Sure did.
Yes, it did. So I think that's all I got. Unless you guys have anything else you want to talk about, we're going to sign off, and we will see you for the next one.
Thanks for watching the Nittany No Huddle podcast.
Check us out on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook.
Podcasts are posted weekly on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss one of our new shows.